They thought he walked away with nothing. A broken veteran, raised in an orphanage, returning to a grandfather's ranch he barely remembered. But when Ranger, his loyal German shepherd, wouldn't stop scratching at the workshop floor, Marcus Reid discovered the truth his grandfather died protecting. A $270 million secret that would change everything. The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning in November, slipped under the door of Marcus Reid's efficiency apartment in Billings. No return address, just a law firm's emblem embossed in faded gold. Marcus sat at his small kitchen table, the envelope untouched between his calloused hands, while Ranger rested his gray-muzzled head on Marcus's knee. The dog knew. Somehow, Ranger always knew when something was about to shift. Marcus had been back stateside for 3 years now, working construction jobs that came and went with the seasons, living in apartments that never quite felt like home. The kind of places where neighbors didn't ask questions and landlords didn't care as long as rent arrived on time. He'd learned to prefer it that way. The anonymity, the distance, the quiet. Ranger stretched, his dark eyes tracking Marcus's trembling hand as it reached for the envelope. The dog had been with him since Afghanistan. A military working dog retired early after an IED blast left them both with scars that didn't always show. They'd saved each other more times than Marcus could count. In the chaos of Kandahar. In the suffocating silence that followed. In the moments when Marcus's own mind turned against him, and only Ranger's warm weight against his chest could pull him back from the edge. The envelope tore with a soft whisper. Inside, a single sheet of letterhead from Whitmore and Associates, attorneys at law, Helena, Montana. Dear Mr. Reid, it is our duty to inform you of the passing of your grandfather, Robert James Reid, on October 3rd of this year. As per the terms of his last will and testament, you are requested to attend the formal reading on November 15th at our offices in Helena. Please contact us at your earliest convenience to confirm your attendance. Marcus read it 3 times before the words truly landed. His grandfather was dead. Robert Reid. A name that lived more in shadows than memory. A man Marcus had known for only the first 7 years of his life, before everything shattered. Before the state took him. Before the orphanage. Before 25 years of questions nobody would answer. Ranger whined softly, pressing closer. I know, boy, Marcus whispered. His throat felt tight, words scraping past something hard and old. I know. He set the letter down and stared out the window at the gray Billings sky. Memories flickered like old film. Riding on his grandfather's shoulders through tall grass, the smell of wood smoke and coffee, strong hands teaching him to tie knots. And then nothing. A blank space where childhood should have been, filled instead with institutional walls and case workers who spoke in carefully neutral tones about what's best for the child. Nobody ever told him why. Why his parents died. Why his grandfather gave him up. Why he spent 18 years in state care, aging out at 25 with nothing but a high school diploma and a one-way ticket to anywhere that wasn't there. The army had been his escape. His purpose. Until it wasn't. Marcus pulled out his phone, fingers hovering over the screen. He could ignore this. Throw the letter away. Keep living in this small, controlled space where the past stayed buried. Ranger shifted, placing one heavy paw on Marcus's boot. The dog's amber eyes held something Marcus had learned to trust more than his own instincts, certainty. You think we should go? Marcus said quietly. Ranger's tail thumped once against the floor. Solid. Sure. Marcus dialed the number. The drive to Helena took 4 hours through Montana's big sky country, the landscape opening up in endless rolls of prairie and distant mountains. Marcus kept the truck's heater on high, but Ranger still pressed against the passenger door, nose leaving fog circles on the window as he watched the world pass. They'd left Billings before dawn, Marcus's few belongings packed in a duffel bag that fit easily in the truck bed. He traveled light these days. Easier to move. Easier to leave. But something about this felt different. Heavier. The law office sat on Last Chance Gulch, Helena's main street, in a brick building that looked like it had witnessed a century of Montana history. Marcus parked across the street, his hands tight on the steering wheel. Just a reading, he murmured to himself. In and out. Ranger tilted his head, unconvinced. Inside, the receptionist directed them to a conference room on the 2nd floor. The hallway smelled of old paper and furniture polish. Each step echoed too loud, and Marcus felt his shoulders tensing, the same way they did when he sensed danger he couldn't yet see. When he opened the conference room door, 3 people were already seated at a long mahogany table. They turned as one, and Marcus felt their eyes land on him with a weight that made his skin prickle. The woman sitting closest looked to be in her 50s, designer suit, perfectly styled blonde hair, expensive jewelry that caught the afternoon light. Beside her sat 2 men, one around 40 with the soft build of someone who'd never missed a meal, the other younger, maybe 30, with sharp eyes and a smirk that made Marcus's jaw tighten. "You must be Marcus," the woman said, her voice carrying the kind of sweetness that didn't reach her eyes. "I'm Diane Reid Calloway, your grandfather's niece. These are my brothers, Richard and Thomas." Marcus nodded slowly, not moving from the doorway. Ranger stood at his side, perfectly still, perfectly alert. "Didn't know Grandpa had family," Marcus said quietly. Diane's smile thinned. "Yes, well, Robert was always private about certain things." The way she said it made Marcus's instincts flare. This wasn't grief. This was something else. "Please sit," came a new voice. Marcus turned to see an elderly man entering behind him. Mid-70s, silver hair, kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He wore a simple gray suit and carried a leather folder that looked as old as he did. "I'm Joseph Whitmore," the man said gently, extending his hand. "I handled your grandfather's affairs for over 40 years. I'm very sorry for your loss, Marcus." The handshake was firm, warm, honest. Marcus felt something in his chest loosen slightly. "And this must be Ranger," Whitmore said, crouching with surprising ease to let the dog sniff his hand. "Robert mentioned you'd have a companion." Marcus's breath caught. He knew about Ranger? Whitmore's eyes crinkled with a sad smile. "He knew more than you might think." They settled around the table, Marcus and Ranger on one side, the 3 cousins on the other, Whitmore at the head. The lawyer opened his folder with careful hands, pulling out documents that crackled with age. "Before we begin," Whitmore said, his voice taking on a formal tone, "I want to acknowledge that this may be difficult for everyone present. Robert Reid was a complicated man who made very specific choices about his estate." Diane leaned forward slightly. Richard's fingers drummed the table. Thomas's smirk had faded into something sharper, hungrier. Ranger shifted closer to Marcus, and Marcus rested a hand on the dog's back, grounding himself. Whitmore began to read. The first items were small, personal effects, family photographs, a collection of antique tools. These went to Diane. Richard received Robert's truck and hunting equipment. Thomas got the small savings account, just under $30,000. With each item, Marcus felt himself shrinking. Of course he wouldn't get anything. Why would a grandfather who gave him away leave him anything now? And finally, Whitmore said, his voice softening, "To my grandson, Marcus James Reid." Marcus's head snapped up. "I leave the entirety of Ridgeline Ranch, all 640 acres, including the main house, workshop, and all structures therein. Additionally, I leave him the contents of my personal safe, to be opened only by him, in the presence of Mr. Whitmore." The silence that followed was deafening. Diane's face had gone pale, then flushed with color. "That's impossible. I assure you, Mrs. Calloway, it is not." "That ranch is worth," Richard sputtered, "approximately $1.2 million. Yes," Whitmore said calmly. Robert was very clear in his wishes. Thomas laughed, a harsh sound. "This is insane." He barely knew the kid. "Marcus has been gone for what, 25 years? Marcus felt the room tilting, his pulse thundering in his ears. "The ranch. His grandfather left him the ranch." "There must be a mistake," Diane said, her voice tight and controlled. "Or undue influence. Marcus, you didn't contact Robert before he died, did you? Convince him to." "I didn't know he was alive," Marcus said quietly, his voice cutting through her accusation like a blade. "Until 4 days ago, I didn't know anything." Ranger growled, low and warning. The cousins fell silent. Whitmore closed the folder. "The will is legal, properly witnessed, and filed with the state. Marcus, if you'll come with me, there are a few more things we need to discuss." Privately, Marcus stood on shaking legs, following Whitmore out of the room with Ranger pressed against his side. Behind them, he heard Diane's furious whisper and Richard's raised voice, but the words blurred into static. In Whitmore's private office, the old lawyer closed the door and gestured to a chair. Marcus sat, his mind still reeling. "They're going to fight this," Marcus said hoarsely. "Oh, undoubtedly. Whitmore settled into his own chair with a sigh. But they'll lose. Your grandfather made absolutely certain of that. He pulled out another envelope, this one sealed with red wax. Marcus's name was written across it in shaking handwriting he didn't recognize, but somehow knew. Robert left this for you. He asked me to give it to you only after the reading, and only when you were alone. Whitmore's eyes grew soft. He loved you very much, Marcus. I hope you'll believe that when you read this. Marcus took the envelope with numb fingers. The wax seal broke easily, and inside was a single handwritten letter. Marcus, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and you've just sat through what I imagine was a very unpleasant reading. I'm sorry for that. I'm sorry for so many things. I know you have questions. Why I gave you up. Why I never fought to get you back. Why I let 25 years pass without contact. The answers are in the ranch, son. Everything you need to know is there. I left you the land because it's yours by right. It was always meant to be yours. But more than that, I left you something else. Something I've protected my entire life. Something worth more than money, more than land, more than anything those vultures in the conference room could ever understand. Go to the ranch. Take Ranger. I know you'll have a good dog by your side. You always loved animals. In the workshop, behind the third workbench from the door, there's a loose floorboard. Pull it up. That's where your answers begin. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you this myself. I'm sorry for all the years we lost. But I never stopped loving you. Never stopped thinking about you. And everything I did to keep you safe. Come home, Marcus. It's time. Grandpa. Marcus read it 3 times, his vision blurring. Ranger whined and placed his head in Marcus's lap, sensing the storm building inside him. Did you know what he was protecting? Marcus asked, his voice rough. Whitmore shook his head slowly. No. Robert was very careful about certain things. But I do know this, he was afraid. Right up until the end, he was afraid of something. Or someone. Marcus folded the letter carefully and stood. I need to see the ranch. Of course. I have the keys and deed right here. Whitmore handed over a large iron key ring and a folder of documents. It's about 2 hours northwest of here, up near the Bob Marshall Wilderness. Very remote. Very beautiful. And Marcus. The old lawyer's face grew serious. Be careful. Your cousins aren't going to accept this quietly. And if Robert was hiding something valuable, they may already suspect. Marcus nodded, his jaw set. I'll be careful. But as he and Ranger walked out of the office and into the fading afternoon light, Marcus felt something shift inside him. For the first time in 25 years, he had a destination. A purpose beyond just surviving to the next day. He had a home waiting, and answers buried in its bones. The drive north took them deeper into Montana's wilderness, away from highways and into winding mountain roads that climbed through forests of lodgepole pine and aspen. The November sun hung low, painting the snow-dusted peaks in shades of amber and rose. Ranger sat upright the entire way, ears forward, as if he too sensed they were heading towards something important. Marcus gripped the steering wheel tighter with each passing mile, his grandfather's letter folded in his jacket pocket, pressing against his heart like a promise. Or a warning. When he finally saw the wooden sign, Ridgeline Ranch, EST 1952, half hidden by overgrown brush, his breath caught. This was it. This was home. Or at least it had been. Once. The gate stood open, hanging crooked on rusted hinges. Marcus drove through slowly, the truck bouncing over ruts in the unpaved drive. The road curved through a meadow of tall grass, brown now with winter's approach, and then the house came into view. 2 stories of weathered log and stone, with a wide porch that wrapped around the front. The roof sagged slightly on the left side, and several windows were dark with grime, but the structure stood solid, defiant against time and neglect. Beside it sat a large workshop, its red paint faded to rust brown, and beyond that a barn and several smaller outbuildings, all showing signs of years without care. Marcus parked and killed the engine. Silence settled over them, broken only by the wind moving through the pines and the distant cry of a hawk. Ranger leaped out first, immediately beginning to patrol the perimeter, nose to the ground. Marcus followed more slowly, his boots crunching on gravel as he approached the porch. Each step felt like walking through memory and dream at once. He knew this place. Somewhere deep in his mind, buried under years of institutional gray, he knew the creak of these boards, the smell of wood smoke that still clung faintly to the air, the way the mountains framed the valley like protective arms. He'd been happy here before. The front door unlocked with a groan of old metal. Marcus pushed it open and stepped inside. Dust motes swirled in the shafts of light cutting through dirty windows. The interior was frozen in time. Furniture covered with white sheets, photographs still hanging on the walls, a coffee mug sitting on the kitchen counter as if Robert had just set it down moments ago. Ranger trotted past him, exploring each room with methodical precision, the way he'd been trained to clear buildings in places far more dangerous than this. Marcus moved through the living room slowly, pulling the sheet off an old leather armchair. His fingers traced the worn armrests, and suddenly he was 7 again, small enough to curl up in this chair with a book while his grandfather worked at his desk nearby. The memory hit so hard he had to steady himself against the chair. A sharp bark from upstairs snapped him back. Ranger stood at the top of the staircase, tail wagging, looking back at Marcus expectantly. "What did you find, boy?" Marcus climbed the stairs, each one creaking under his weight. Ranger led him down the hall to the last door on the right. It stood slightly ajar. Marcus pushed it open and froze. A child's bedroom. His bedroom. Exactly as he'd left it. A small bed with a blue quilt. Shelves lined with toy trucks and carved wooden animals. A drawing pinned to the wall, stick figures labeled in crayon. Me, Mama, Papa, Grandpa. His throat closed. He crossed to the drawing, fingers trembling as he touched the faded paper. He remembered making this. Remembered his mother's laugh when he showed her. Remembered his father lifting him up so he could pin it to the wall. And then he remembered nothing. Because everything after that was gone, wiped away by whatever happened that he was never told about. Ranger whined softly and pressed against his leg. "They kept it," Marcus whispered. "All these years, he kept my room exactly the same." He sank onto the small bed, his adult frame too large for the child-sized furniture, and let himself feel the weight of everything he'd lost. The childhood stolen. The family erased. The questions that echoed through 25 years of silence. But his grandfather's letter said the answers were here. In the workshop, Marcus stood, wiping his eyes roughly with the back of his hand. "Come on, Ranger. Let's find out what he was protecting." The workshop sat separate from the house, connected by a worn path through what had once been a garden. The building was larger than it looked from the road, maybe 40 feet long, with high ceilings and windows running along the top for light. Marcus unlocked the heavy padlock and pulled the door open. The smell hit him first: sawdust, oil, metal, and something else. Something like memory itself. Inside was a craftsman's paradise. Workbenches lined the walls, still organized with tools hanging in precise rows. A table saw sat in the corner, covered with a tarp. Shelves held jars of nails, screws, bolts, all labeled in neat handwriting. And in the center of the space, partially covered with canvas, sat the outline of something large. A vehicle, maybe, or machinery. But Marcus wasn't here for that. He was here for the third workbench from the door. Ranger followed as Marcus counted. 1, 2, 3. The bench looked identical to the others: scarred wood, vice grip mounted on one end, tools scattered across the surface. Marcus knelt and ran his hands along the floor beneath it. The boards were old pine, worn smooth by decades of boots, and at first, everything felt solid. Then his fingers found it. A slight gap between two planks, too uniform to be natural wear. Ranger's tail began to wag faster, his nose pressed close to the spot. "You smell something, don't you?" Marcus murmured. He pulled out his pocket knife and worked the blade into the gap. The board resisted, then gave with a soft pop. Marcus lifted it carefully, revealing a dark space beneath. His heart hammered as he pulled out his phone and turned on the flashlight. The beam illuminated a metal box, about the size of a briefcase, sitting in the cavity between floor joists. It was old, military-grade, with a combination lock on the front. Marcus lifted it out, surprised by its weight. He set it on the workbench and stared at the lock. No combination. No instructions. Just his grandfather's faith that Marcus would figure it out. He closed his eyes, thinking, what would Robert have used? A birthday? An anniversary? Then it came to him. The date carved into the wooden sign at the entrance. EST 1952. Marcus spun the dial. 1-9-5-2. The lock clicked open. Ranger barked once, sharp and certain. Marcus lifted the lid, his breath held. Inside was a leather journal, worn and cracked with age. Beneath it, a stack of yellowed photographs bound with string. And at the bottom, a folded piece of paper with Marcus's name written across it in the same shaking handwriting as the letter from Whitmore's office. Marcus reached for the note first, unfolding it with careful fingers. Marcus, if you found this, you followed the first clue. Good. There are more, and each one will lead you closer to the truth about what happened to your parents, why I had to let you go, and what I've been protecting all these years. But I need you to understand something before you go further. What you're about to uncover is dangerous. There are people who would kill to keep these secrets buried. People with power, money, and no conscience. I hid everything in pieces so that if one part was discovered, the rest would remain safe. The workshop is just the beginning. The real answers are in the ranch itself, in places only someone who truly knows this land could find. Trust Ranger. Dogs know things we can't see. He'll help you when you need it most. The journal will give you the history. The photographs will show you the faces. But the final piece, the reason for everything, is hidden where only family would think to look. Be careful, son. They're still out there. And if they learn you're searching, they'll come for you too. I love you. I'm sorry. And I'm proud of the man you've become. Grandpa. Marcus's hands shook as he set the note down. Ranger whined and nuzzled his palm, sensing his rising anxiety. What the hell did you get into, Grandpa? Marcus whispered. He reached for the journal, its leather cover soft with age and handling. The first page bore a date, June 15th, 1952. Today I broke ground on Ridgeline Ranch. Martha is already planning where the garden will go, and little Sarah, Marcus's mother, keeps asking when the horses will arrive. This land is ours now, our fresh start, our sanctuary. But I brought more than hope to this valley. I brought a secret from the war, something I swore to protect until my dying breath. Something that must never fall into the wrong hands. Marcus flipped forward, scanning entries. Years of ranch life, of building a home, of raising a daughter. But threaded through it all were references to something else. Something his grandfather called the inheritance. October 3rd, 1968. Check the cash today. All still secure. Martha worries I'm too paranoid, but she doesn't understand what I saw in France. What we found. What we took to keep it from them. January 17th, 1975. Sarah is engaged. A good man, James Reid. I'll tell him nothing about the inheritance. Better he never knows. Better everyone stays ignorant and safe. November 8th, 1987. Marcus was born today. My grandson. When I held him, I thought about what I'll leave behind. The land, yes, but also the burden. Pray he never has to carry it. Marcus's throat tightened. He flipped faster, looking for recent entries, for anything about his parents' deaths, about what happened when he was 7. There. March 14th, 1994. They found out. I don't know how, but they know about the cash. 2 men came to the ranch today asking questions about the war, about my unit, about artifacts of historical value. I played dumb, but they knew. I could see it in their eyes. Sarah and James are in danger. Marcus is in danger. I have to protect them, even if it means. The entry stopped mid-sentence. The ink smeared as if Robert had been interrupted. The next entry was dated a week later, and the handwriting was barely legible. March 21st, 1994. They're dead. Sarah and James. The state police say it was an accident, brake failure on the mountain road. But I know better. I know what this is. Marcus is all I have left. The authorities are already asking questions, saying I'm too old to care for a child alone, suggesting foster care would be best. But I know the truth. They're threatening to take him, to use him as leverage to get what they want. I have to make a choice. Give up Marcus to keep him safe, or fight and risk losing him permanently, or worse. God forgive me. I'm sending him away. Into the system, where they can't find him. Where he can live a normal life, free from this curse I brought home from the war. I'll hide everything. Split it up. Protect it. And one day, when he's old enough, strong enough, I'll bring him home and tell him the truth. I love you, Marcus. Even if you never know it. Even if you hate me for what I'm about to do. Marcus's vision blurred. His hands clenched the journal so hard the leather creaked. They killed his parents. Murdered them and made it look like an accident. And his grandfather sent him away to save his life. Ranger barked sharply, pulling Marcus back from the spiral of rage and grief threatening to consume him. I'm okay, Marcus said roughly, though he wasn't. I'm okay. He forced himself to keep reading, to finish what Robert had started. The entries continued sporadically over the years. Robert documenting his efforts to hide the inheritance, to throw pursuers off the trail, to create a maze of clues that only Marcus could follow. July 4th, 2003. Split the first cache today. Half remains in the original location. Half is now hidden in the foundation of the workshop. If they find one, they won't find both. December 25th, 2010. Marcus would be 23 now. A man. I wonder who he's become. If he's happy. If he's safe. I want to reach out, but I can't risk it. Not yet. Not while they're still searching. February 8th, 2018. They came back. Different men this time, but the same questions. They think I'm senile now, easy to manipulate. They have no idea what I've built here. What I've protected. The legacy isn't just gold and artifacts. It's justice. It's truth. And when Marcus is ready, he'll use it to destroy them. The final entry was dated just 3 months before Robert's death. August 15th, 2024. I'm dying. The doctor says 6 months, maybe less. It's time to set everything in motion. The will is updated. Whitmore knows what to do. The clues are all in place. Marcus, if you're reading this, I'm so sorry. Sorry for the years we lost. Sorry for the burden I'm about to place on your shoulders. But you're the only one I trust. The only one strong enough to finish this. The workshop holds the first cache, tools, and documents. But the real treasure, the $270 million inheritance I've protected for 70 years, is hidden in the one place they'd never think to look. The one place only someone who truly knows this ranch could find. Follow the foundation. Trust the dog. And remember, you're not just inheriting money. You're inheriting a war. Marcus closed the journal slowly, his mind reeling. $270 million. Hidden somewhere on this property. Protected for 70 years. And people who killed for it once would kill for it again. Ranger barked, sharper this time, his body going rigid. The dog's ears pinned back, a low growl rumbling from his chest as he stared toward the workshop door. Marcus's training kicked in instantly. He killed his phone's flashlight and moved into the shadows, hand automatically reaching for a weapon he no longer carried. Outside, gravel crunched. Footsteps. Slow and deliberate. Someone was here. Marcus's pulse thundered in his ears as he pressed himself against the wall beside the door, Ranger a coiled shadow at his feet. The dog's growl was barely audible now, a vibration more than sound, but Marcus felt the tension radiating from him. The footsteps stopped just outside. A voice called out, male, casual. Mr. Reid? Marcus Reid? It's Sheriff Clayton. Just doing a welfare check. Marcus's jaw clenched. The voice was too friendly, too practiced. And what sheriff drove all the way out to a remote ranch for a welfare check the same day a will was read? I saw your truck, the voice continued. Just wanted to make sure everything's all right out here. Place has been empty for months. Ranger's hackles rose higher. Marcus made a decision. He couldn't hide. His truck was in plain sight. But he could control the encounter. He grabbed the metal box, stuffed the journal and photographs into his jacket, and kicked the floorboard back into place. Then he stepped toward the door, Ranger moving with him like a shadow. Marcus pulled the door open, keeping his body language relaxed despite the adrenaline flooding his system. A man in his 50s stood in the fading daylight, wearing a sheriff's uniform and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with the kind of weathered face that came from years in Montana's sun and wind. His hand rested casually near his sidearm. Sheriff Clayton, Marcus said evenly. Wasn't expecting a visitor. Nobody out here usually gets many, Clayton replied, his gaze flicking to Ranger. That's a fine-looking dog. Military. Retired. Like me. Well, thank you for your service. The words were automatic, meaningless. I heard about Robert passing. Sorry for your loss. He was a good man. Kept to himself mostly, but good. Marcus said nothing, just waited. Clayton's smile widened slightly. Heard there was a will reading today in Helena. Figured you might be coming out to look at the place. Wanted to make sure you knew we keep an eye on properties out here. A lot of folks think they can squat in empty ranches, but we don't tolerate that. Good to know. I'm the owner now, so no worries about squatters. Right. So you'll be staying? Or planning to sell? There it was. The real question. Haven't decided yet, Marcus said carefully. Just got here. Clayton nodded slowly, his eyes scanning the workshop behind Marcus, lingering on the covered shape in the center. Place probably needs a lot of work. Your grandfather let it go these last few years. If you're thinking of selling, I know some folks who might be interested. Save you the trouble of fixing it up. I'll keep that in mind. You do that. Clayton's smile faded slightly. One more thing. Your grandfather, toward the end, he got a little confused. Started saying strange things about people watching the ranch, about hiding things. Dementia, probably. But if you find anything unusual out here, anything that seems off, you let me know right away. Okay. Marcus kept his expression neutral, but every instinct screamed warning. This wasn't a wellness check. This was reconnaissance. Sure, Sheriff. I'll let you know. Clayton tipped his hat. Welcome to the county, Mr. Reid. Hope you enjoy your stay. He walked back to his patrol vehicle, a white SUV with official markings, and drove away slowly, gravel crunching under his tires. Marcus didn't move until the vehicle disappeared from sight. Then he let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. Ranger relaxed slightly, but kept his eyes trained on the road. They know I'm here, Marcus said quietly, and they're already probing. He locked the workshop and headed back to the house, his mind racing. Robert's warning echoed in his head. There are people who would kill to keep these secrets buried. People with power, money, and no conscience. Inside the house, Marcus checked every window, every door, making sure they were secure. Military habits died hard. He cleared each room systematically, Ranger at his side, until he was satisfied they were alone. Then he spread the photographs from the metal box across the kitchen table. The images were old, black and white or faded color, most showing men in military uniforms. Marcus recognized his grandfather in several. Younger, harder, standing with other soldiers in front of tanks and jeeps. But one photograph caught his attention. It showed a group of 8 men standing in front of what looked like a cave entrance. They were dirty, exhausted, but smiling. Several held shovels. And in the background, partially visible in the cave mouth, were stacks of wooden crates. Marcus flipped it over. Written on the back in pencil, Baker Company, 3rd Battalion, France, August 1944. The day we found it. Found what? He grabbed the journal again, searching for entries from 1944. There, a section he'd skipped earlier. August 12, 1944. We were supposed to be scouting German positions near the Vosges Mountains when Johnson's unit radioed about a cave system. Said they'd found something. We thought it was a German supply cache, maybe ammunition. It wasn't. What we found was a Nazi treasure vault. Gold bars stamped with swastikas. Artwork. Artifacts. Millions of dollars worth, maybe more. Stolen from Jewish families, museums, banks across Europe. Blood money. Command would have taken it. Sent it up the chain. And most of it would have disappeared into bureaucratic limbo, while the people it was stolen from got nothing. So we made a decision. 8 of us. We'd hide it, keep it safe, and after the war, we'd track down the families it belonged to. Return what was stolen. Make it right. We buried it in that cave, made it look like a collapse. Took careful notes about locations, families, addresses. Then we swore an oath. The treasure stays hidden until we can return it properly, until justice can be served. But the war moved on. 2 of our men died in the Bulge. Johnson got hit during the Rhine crossing. By war's end, only 4 of us knew the truth. Marcus's hands shook as he turned the page. September 1945, tried to go back. The cave was in French territory now, unstable. The French military wouldn't let us near it. We had to retreat, regroup. October 1945, managed to retrieve the cache. All of it. We split it 4 ways. Easier to transport, harder to trace. My share came home with me in a shipping container marked agricultural equipment. Cost me 3 months' pay and bribes, but I got it here. To Montana. To safety. The plan was always to return it. But we needed time. We needed to find the families. We needed to do it right. Then the others started dying. Car accidents. House fires. Heart attacks. By 1952, I was the only one left. I'm not naive. Someone knew. Someone wanted the treasure back, and they were willing to kill for it. So I buried it deeper, hid it better, and waited. Marcus sat back, his mind reeling. His grandfather had spent 70 years protecting Nazi-looted gold, not for himself, but to return it to its rightful owners. And people had killed to stop him, including, it seemed, Marcus's own parents. Ranger whined softly and placed his head on Marcus's lap. It's not just money, Marcus whispered. It's stolen lives, stolen futures, and Grandpa was trying to give them back. He looked at the remaining photographs. Several showed the same 8 men at different times, celebrating, exhausted, wounded, brothers forged in war. And then he found it. A photograph dated 1980, showing 3 men standing outside this very house. His grandfather was in the center, gray-haired but strong. To his left stood a stranger Marcus didn't recognize, but to his right stood someone he did. Sheriff Clayton. Younger, without the uniform, but unmistakably him. Marcus's blood ran cold. He flipped the photo over. Robert Reid, Sheriff Thomas Clayton Sr., and Deputy Michael Harrow, last surviving members of Baker Company. Clayton's father had been one of the 8, which meant Clayton knew about the treasure, had probably grown up hearing about it, had probably spent his entire life searching for it. And now he wore a badge, which gave him the perfect cover to watch, to wait, to investigate without suspicion. Marcus's phone buzzed, making him jump. A text from an unknown number. "This is Joseph Whitmore. Just wanted to check that you arrived safely. Please call when you can. Important information to discuss." Marcus dialed immediately. Whitmore answered on the first ring. "Marcus, thank God. Are you at the ranch?" "Yes, and I already had a visitor. Sheriff Clayton." A long pause. What did he want? Pretended it was a welfare check. Asked if I was planning to sell. Wanted to know if I'd found anything unusual. Whitmore's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "Marcus, listen to me carefully. Thomas Clayton has been circling this ranch for 30 years. He believes your grandfather hid something valuable here, and he's not wrong. But he doesn't know the full story. His father was one of the 8 soldiers," Marcus said. "I found a photograph." "Yes. Thomas Clayton Sr. died in 1982. Your grandfather always suspected it wasn't natural causes, but he could never prove it. After that, Robert became even more paranoid, more careful. He knew Thomas Jr. would continue the search. How much do you know about what's hidden here?" Another pause. "Not the details. Robert was very careful about that. But I know it's substantial. And I know people have died trying to find it. Including, I believe, your parents." Marcus's grip tightened on the phone. "He sent me away to protect me." "He did. And he spent every day since making sure that when you came back, you'd be ready. That you'd have all the tools you needed to finish what he started." I found his journal. Photographs. Instructions to follow the foundation. But I don't know what that means. Then you need to figure it out before Clayton does. Because I guarantee you, he's not going to stop at a friendly visit. And Marcus? Yeah. There's something else. Your cousins, Diane, Richard, and Thomas, they filed a lawsuit this afternoon challenging the will. They claim undue influence and mental incompetence. It's baseless, but it will tie up the estate for months, maybe years. Marcus closed his eyes. Of course they did. Can they take the ranch? Not easily. But they can make your life hell trying. And I suspect that's exactly the point. Keep you distracted, keep you visible, keep you vulnerable. You think they're working with Clayton? I think everyone in this county has an agenda, and very few of them have your best interests at heart. Trust no one. Find what Robert wanted you to find, and get out before they realize what you've discovered. The call ended. Marcus sat in the darkening kitchen, his grandfather's journal open before him, Ranger warm and solid against his leg. Follow the foundation, the journal said. Trust the dog. And remember, you're not just inheriting money. You're inheriting a war. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the old windows. Night was falling fast in the Montana mountains, and Marcus was alone in a house full of secrets, surrounded by people who wanted him gone. But he wasn't the same broken kid who'd been torn from this place 25 years ago. He was a combat veteran. He'd survived worse than small-town corruption and greedy relatives. And he had Ranger. Marcus stood, moving to the window. The workshop sat dark against the twilight, its secrets hidden beneath floorboards and lies. Tomorrow, he told Ranger quietly. Tomorrow we start searching. And we don't stop until we find every piece of what Grandpa hid. Ranger's tail thumped once, solid and sure. Outside, in the gathering dark, Marcus could have sworn he saw headlights on the distant road. Watching, waiting. The war his grandfather started was about to become his own. And Marcus was ready. Marcus woke before dawn to Ranger's low growl. The dog stood rigid at the bedroom window, staring into the pre-dawn darkness. Marcus was on his feet instantly, muscles tensed, the old combat reflexes firing before his conscious mind caught up. He moved to the window, staying to the side, and peered out. Nothing. just the black silhouettes of pines against a sky beginning to pale with approaching sunrise. The workshop sat quiet and dark. No movement, no vehicles. But Ranger didn't growl at nothing. "What is it, boy?" Marcus whispered. The dog's ears twitched, tracking something Marcus couldn't hear. Then, faintly, he caught it too. The distant sound of an engine, far off but moving closer. Marcus checked his watch. 5:47 a.m. Nobody had legitimate business out here this early. He dressed quickly, pulling on boots and his worn field jacket. From his duffel, he retrieved the one item he'd kept from his service, a pair of military-grade binoculars. Then he and Ranger moved downstairs, silent as smoke. Through the kitchen window, Marcus scanned the access road. There, maybe half a mile out, headlights moving slowly, deliberately. Not the sheriff's SUV. This was a truck, dark-colored, crawling along the road that led to the ranch. The truck stopped just beyond the property line, lights cutting off. Marcus's jaw clenched. Surveillance. Someone was watching to see what he'd do, where he'd go, what he might find. "Two can play that game," he muttered. He fed Ranger, made coffee, and ate a quick breakfast, all while keeping his movements visible through the windows. Let them think he was just settling in, unaware of their presence. But his mind was racing through Robert's instructions. Follow the foundation. The one place only someone who truly knows this ranch could find. The foundation of what? The house? The workshop? The barn? Marcus pulled out the journal again, searching for any mention of foundations or construction. There, an entry from 1953. May 15th, 1953, finally finished the root cellar. Dug it deep, reinforced with concrete and rebar. Martha says I'm being paranoid, building it like a bomb shelter, but after what I've seen, paranoia keeps you alive. The entrance is hidden in the workshop foundation, accessible through the old storm drain system. Nobody would think to look there. Marcus's pulse quickened. A root cellar, hidden beneath the workshop, connected to storm drains. He'd seen storm drains yesterday. Old iron grates around the property's perimeter, designed to channel spring runoff away from the buildings. They looked decorative, forgotten, the kind of thing nobody would give a second thought. But one of them led to the root cellar. And if Robert hid anything, that's where it would be. Marcus forced himself to wait until full daylight. He needed to appear normal, unhurried. So he spent the morning doing exactly what someone inheriting a ranch would do. Inspecting the property, checking fences, surveying the land. Ranger trotted alongside him, playing his role perfectly. To anyone watching, they were just a man and his dog, getting acquainted with their inheritance. But Marcus was counting storm drains, noting their locations, looking for anything that seemed out of place. He found it near the back of the workshop. A grate slightly larger than the others, set into the ground at an odd angle, as if the earth had shifted over the years. The iron was old, rusted, but when Marcus crouched to examine it, he noticed something the casual observer would miss. Fresh scratches in the rust around the edges. Someone had opened this recently. His grandfather, probably, in his final months. Making sure the entrance was still accessible, Marcus stood, continuing his casual inspection, but his mind was locked on that grate. He'd need tools to lift it, probably a pry bar, and he'd need to do it when he wasn't being watched. The distant truck hadn't moved all morning. Around noon, a different vehicle appeared, a silver sedan that pulled directly into the ranch driveway. Marcus recognized Diane's car from the law office parking lot. He waited on the porch as she climbed out, dressed in expensive casual wear that looked ridiculous against the ranch's rustic backdrop. Richard and Thomas emerged from the back seat, both wearing expressions that mixed anger with something harder to read. Fear, maybe. "Marcus," Diane called, her voice carrying false sweetness. "We need to talk." Ranger positioned himself between Marcus and the approaching trio, not aggressive, just present. "About what?" Marcus asked evenly. "About this ridiculous situation," Richard said, gesturing at the ranch. "You have to see how unfair this is. We grew up knowing Uncle Robert. You disappeared for 25 years. Not by choice." "Still," Diane interjected, "we have history here. Connections. And frankly, you're in no position to maintain a property like this. You're," she hesitated, choosing her words carefully, "you're a veteran. With challenges. PTSD, probably. This ranch needs someone stable, someone capable." Marcus felt heat rise in his chest, but he kept his voice level. The will is legal. Whitmore confirmed it. Wills can be contested, Thomas said, especially when there's clear evidence of undue influence or mental incompetence. Robert wasn't incompetent. He was 86 years old and living alone in the middle of nowhere. Diane snapped, her pleasant facade cracking. Who knows what kind of ideas got into his head? What kind of promises someone might have whispered to a lonely, dying old man? Ranger growled, low and warning. I never contacted him, Marcus said, his voice hard as stone. Not once in 25 years. There was no undue influence because there was no contact. So you say, Richard muttered. Marcus took a step forward, and all three cousins stepped back. This conversation is over. You're trespassing on private property. Leave. We have every right to, Diane started. You have no rights here. The will was read. The property is mine. And if you don't leave right now, I'll call the sheriff and have you removed. Thomas laughed bitterly. Oh, please do. Clayton would love to hear how you're threatening us. The comment landed like a punch. They knew Clayton. Were probably counting on his support. Marcus pulled out his phone, but instead of calling the sheriff, he dialed Whitmore's number and put it on speaker. The lawyer answered immediately. Marcus. Mr. Whitmore, I have Diane, Richard, and Thomas Reid on my property refusing to leave. Can you confirm for them that they have no legal right to be here? Whitmore's voice came through crisp and authoritative. Mrs. Calloway, gentlemen, the property was legally transferred to Marcus Reid upon Robert Reid's death. Any presence on that property without Marcus's explicit permission constitutes trespassing. I suggest you leave immediately, or I'll be forced to pursue legal remedies. Diane's face flushed red. This isn't over. No, Marcus agreed quietly. I don't suppose it is. But it's over for today. They left, but not before Thomas paused at his car door and called back. You have no idea what you're dealing with, Marcus. No idea what that old man was hiding. But we do. And we're not going to let some PTSD case walk away with what's rightfully ours. The words were designed to cut, to destabilize. And they might have worked on someone else. But Marcus had been called worse by better people. He waited until their car disappeared down the road, then turned to find the surveillance truck also pulling away. Interesting. The cousins and the watchers were coordinating. They're scared, Marcus said to Ranger. They know something's here, and they're terrified I'll find it first. Which meant he needed to move fast. That night, Marcus waited until well after midnight. The moon was a thin crescent, providing just enough light to navigate, but not enough to be easily seen. He dressed in dark clothes, grabbed a pry bar and flashlight from the workshop, and led Ranger to the back grate. The dog's excitement was palpable, his tail wagging as they approached. You know, don't you? Marcus whispered. You can smell it. Whatever's down there. He worked the pry bar under the grate's edge. It resisted, rust and time fighting him, but finally gave with a metallic groan that seemed too loud in the quiet night. Marcus froze, listening. Nothing. Just wind in the pines and the distant call of an owl. He lifted the grate completely, revealing a dark shaft that dropped about 8 feet before turning horizontal. Old iron rungs were set into the concrete wall, forming a ladder. Ranger whined, uncertain about the descent. I know, boy, but we have to see what's down there. Marcus descended first, testing each rung before trusting it with his full weight. The shaft smelled of earth and old water, but it was dry, the concrete still solid after 70 years. At the bottom, his boots hit stone. He clicked on his flashlight. The beam revealed a tunnel, maybe 4 feet high, running toward the workshop. The walls were reinforced with timber and concrete, clearly hand-built with meticulous care. This wasn't a simple storm drain. This was an escape route, or a smuggling passage, or both. Above him, Ranger barked once, anxious. Come on, boy. You can do it. The dog hesitated, then carefully descended the ladder, his claws scraping on metal. When he reached the bottom, he immediately pressed against Marcus's leg, seeking reassurance in the confined space. Together, they moved down the tunnel. It sloped gently downward, going deeper beneath the earth. After about 30 feet, the passage opened into a small chamber, maybe 10 by 10 feet. And there, set into the far wall, was a heavy steel door. Marcus's breath caught. This was it. The root cellar Robert wrote about. The door had a modern lock, not the kind from the 1950s. Robert had upgraded it, probably within the last few decades. And mounted beside the lock was a small keypad, its LED light glowing faint red. A code. Marcus needed a code. He thought frantically, running through numbers. Robert's birthday? No, too obvious. Marcus's birthday? The ranch founding date? Then he remembered something from the journal. An entry where Robert had written about the oath the 8 soldiers made. The date they'd found the treasure. August 12, 1944. Marcus punched in 0-8-1-2-4-4. The LED blinked green. A bolt slid back with a heavy clunk. Ranger's tail began wagging furiously. Marcus pulled the door open, and stale air rushed out, cool and dry. He shone his light inside. The root cellar was larger than he expected, easily 20 by 20 feet, with the ceiling reinforced by thick wooden beams. But it wasn't food stored here. Stacked along one wall were wooden crates, old military surplus, each stenciled with faded letters. Along another wall stood modern fireproof filing cabinets. And in the center of the room sat a large workbench covered with documents, maps, and photographs, all protected by plastic sheeting. Marcus stepped inside, his heart pounding so hard he could feel it in his throat. This was his grandfather's real workshop, his war room, the place where Robert Reid had spent 70 years trying to make things right. He approached the workbench first, carefully removing the plastic sheeting. Underneath were dozens of files, each labeled with a name and location. Goldstein family, Vienna, Austria Rousseau collection, Paris, France Levi estate, Amsterdam, Netherlands. Family after family, collection after collection. Each file containing photographs of artwork, jewelry, heirlooms, all cataloged with meticulous detail. And beside each description, handwritten notes tracking genealogy, survivor lists, current addresses where Robert had managed to find them. This wasn't just about gold. This was about returning stolen lives, stolen memories, stolen futures. Marcus moved to the filing cabinets and pulled open the first drawer. Inside were more files, but these were different. Legal documents, bank records, corporate filings. And at the front, a file labeled the network. Marcus pulled it out, his hands shaking slightly. Inside were photographs of men in suits, shaking hands at formal events, posing at ribbon cuttings and charity galas. He recognized several faces, local politicians, businessmen, even a judge. And there, in the center of one photograph, stood a younger Thomas Clayton, standing beside his father. Beneath the photos were documents showing land purchases, mineral rights acquisitions, suspicious property transfers. A pattern emerged as Marcus read: properties acquired for pennies on the dollar after owners mysteriously died or were forced to sell. Properties that all shared one thing: they sat above old mining claims or had access to government land. Robert's notes in the margin read, "They're still searching. They think the treasure was split and buried in multiple locations. They've been buying up land for 40 years, digging, searching, killing anyone who gets too close." Marcus's blood ran cold. His parents' accident wasn't personal. They'd just been in the way, living on land the network wanted access to. Ranger suddenly barked, sharp and alarmed, his attention fixed on the tunnel entrance. Marcus killed his flashlight instantly, plunging them into darkness. He strained to listen. There, faint but distinct. Footsteps. Someone else was in the tunnel. His mind raced. Only one entrance, and someone was between him and escape. He was trapped. But then Ranger did something unexpected. Instead of growling or positioning himself to fight, the dog moved to the far corner of the cellar and began scratching at the wall. Marcus risked a brief flash of light, keeping it pointed at the floor. Where Ranger scratched, the wall looked different. Newer concrete, a different texture. Another door. Another escape route. Robert had thought of everything. The footsteps were getting closer, moving cautiously but steadily. Marcus found the seam in the wall, running his fingers along it until he located a small recessed handle. He pulled, and a section of wall swung inward, revealing another tunnel, this one even narrower. "Go," he whispered to Ranger. The dog slipped through. Marcus grabbed as many files as he could carry, stuffed them into his jacket, and followed. He pulled the hidden door closed just as light flooded the main chamber behind him. A voice echoed through the cellar. Well, looks like someone's been busy." It was Clayton's voice. Not surprised. Not angry. Almost satisfied. Marcus didn't wait to hear more. He and Ranger moved through the narrow passage, using only touch to guide them. The tunnel went up, then leveled out, then up again. Marcus's shoulders scraped the walls, and twice he had to turn sideways to fit through tight spots. But Robert had built this passage for escape, and it worked. After what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes, Marcus saw dim light ahead. The tunnel ended at a grate similar to the one they'd entered through, this one concealed behind overgrown brush near the tree line, 100 yards from the house. Marcus pushed it open and climbed out, Ranger scrambling up beside him. Behind them, the tunnel stretched back toward the cellar, dark and silent. No sign of pursuit. Clayton must have assumed Marcus escaped back the way he came. Marcus moved quickly through the trees, circling wide around the property, approaching the house from an unexpected angle. He needed to get inside, needed to secure what he'd found, needed to figure out his next move. But as he cleared the tree line, he stopped dead. The house was dark except for one window on the second floor, his old bedroom. And in that window, clearly silhouetted against the faint interior light, stood a figure. Someone was inside his house. Ranger growled, low and dangerous. Marcus's mind raced through options. Confront them? Call the actual state police? Run? But then the figure moved, and Marcus caught a glimpse of the profile. It wasn't Clayton. It was a woman. Older, gray-haired, wearing what looked like a long coat. She stood perfectly still, looking out at the property as if searching for something. Or someone. Then she turned, and even from this distance, even in the dark, Marcus saw her raise a hand to the window glass and place it there, palm flat, in what could only be described as a gesture of longing. Or goodbye. The figure disappeared from the window, and a moment later, Marcus saw a small penlight bobbing through the house, heading downstairs. He moved fast, covering the distance to the back door in seconds. It was unlocked. He'd locked it. He knew he had, which meant someone had picked it or had a key. Marcus slipped inside just as the front door opened and closed softly. Through the window, he saw a dark sedan parked where he hadn't noticed it before, partially hidden by the workshop. The car's dome light clicked on briefly as the figure got in, and Marcus finally got a clear look at her face. His heart stopped. He knew that face. It was older, lined with age and grief, but he knew it. His grandmother, Martha Reid, the woman whose grave he'd seen in the Helena Cemetery, dated 2015. But that was impossible. The car pulled away, driving slowly down the ranch road without headlights, disappearing into the night. Ranger whined, pressing close to Marcus's leg, sensing his confusion and rising panic. That's not possible, Marcus whispered. She's dead. She died 9 years ago. I saw the headstone. But he'd seen her, as clearly as he saw Ranger now. Marcus's hands shook as he locked the door and moved through the house, checking what had been disturbed. The intruder had been in his old bedroom, that much was clear. But nothing was taken, nothing damaged. On his small bed, neatly folded, was a quilt he didn't remember seeing before. Old but well-maintained, with a pattern of stars and moons stitched in blue and silver thread. Tucked into the quilt was a note, written in delicate handwriting he recognized from the photographs in the cellar. My dearest Marcus, forgive an old woman for one last visit to the place where you were happy. I know you must have seen my gravestone and believe I'm gone, but some secrets run deeper than death. Your grandfather protected you by sending you away. I protected you by disappearing. They needed to believe I was dead, that I could no longer interfere or reveal what I knew. But I never stopped watching, never stopped hoping you'd come home. The files you found tonight are only part of the truth. The treasure is real, but it's not in the cellar. That was a decoy, a place for your grandfather to keep his research, his evidence against the network. The real cash, the $270 million in gold and artifacts, is hidden where only family would know to look. Where you and I spent hours together when you were small, before everything fell apart. Remember the story I used to tell you? About the princess who hid her kingdom's treasure under the stars? You used to say you'd find it someday. You were closer to the truth than you knew, my darling boy. The stars will show you the way. But be careful. They're watching. They've always been watching. With all my love, Grandma. Marcus read the note 3 times, his mind reeling. His grandmother was alive. Alive and in hiding for 9 years. And she'd just been in this house, in his old bedroom, leaving him a message. The princess story. He remembered it vaguely. A fairy tale she'd made up. Something about hiding treasure under the stars where no one would think to look. He'd been 4, maybe 5. Too young to understand metaphors. But old enough to remember how the story ended. with the treasure being found by the one person pure of heart who looked up instead of down. Looked up instead of down. Marcus walked to the window and stared out at the night sky. The clouds had cleared, and stars blazed across the Montana darkness, brilliant and cold. Ranger followed his gaze, then looked back at Marcus expectantly. Under the stars, Marcus whispered. Not buried. Not hidden in the ground. Somewhere you can see the stars. His mind raced through the property. The barn had a loft with windows. The workshop roof was partially open to the sky where boards had rotted. The house itself had a widow's walk, a small platform on the roof where you could. The widow's walk. Marcus ran upstairs, Ranger at his heels. At the end of the hallway was a narrow door he'd barely noticed, painted the same color as the walls. He pulled it open, revealing a steep staircase. At the top was the widow's walk, a small platform enclosed by a railing, maybe 6 by 6 feet. Marcus had been up here once as a child, he remembered now, with his grandmother on a clear summer night. She'd pointed out constellations, told him stories about heroes and monsters written in the stars. And she'd said something else, something he'd forgotten until this moment. Sometimes the best hiding places are in plain sight, Marcus. Up high where everyone's looking down. The widow's walk floor was made of painted wood boards, weathered but solid. Marcus knelt and began testing them, pressing, pulling, looking for anything loose. Ranger sniffed systematically, his nose working over every inch. And then the dog stopped, sat down, and barked once. Right in the center of the platform. Marcus pressed that board. It gave slightly, more than the others. He worked his fingers under the edge and lifted. The board came up easily, revealing a space underneath. And in that space, wrapped in thick oilcloth, was a leather-bound book. Marcus lifted it carefully, his hands trembling. It was heavy, substantial, filled with pages. He unwrapped the oilcloth and opened the book. The first page bore a title in his grandmother's handwriting. The Truth About Ridgeline Ranch and the Inheritance We Protected for 70 Years. For Marcus, when he's ready to finish what we started. Marcus sat on the widow's walk under the stars. Ranger pressed warm against his side and began to read. And with each page, the full scope of what his grandparents had protected and what they'd sacrificed finally became clear. The book his grandmother left wasn't just a record. It was a confession, a battle plan, and a love letter all woven together in pages of careful handwriting. Marcus read through the night, Ranger keeping watch beside him as the temperature dropped and frost formed on the railing. But Marcus barely noticed the cold. Each page pulled him deeper into a story that rewrote everything he thought he knew about his family. June 1945, Robert came home different. The war changed all men, but what he'd seen, what he'd done, what he'd taken responsibility for, it marked him in ways I didn't understand for years. He told me about the treasure eventually, about the cave in France, the gold stamped with swastikas, the artwork stolen from families who'd been murdered, about the oath he and 7 other men made to return it all. But the others started dying, one by one, accidents that were too convenient, too perfectly timed. By 1952, Robert knew. Someone wanted the treasure back, not to return it to the rightful owners, but to keep it, to profit from genocide. So we ran, came to Montana, built Ridgeline Ranch in the middle of nowhere. And we hid the treasure in the one place no one would ever think to look, because the best hiding place isn't a vault or a cave. It's in plain sight, disguised as something ordinary. Marcus's pulse quickened. She was about to tell him where it was. We built the barn first. Robert insisted on doing most of the work himself, said he needed it to be precise. The foundation, he said, had to be perfect. And it was. Perfect concrete and rebar, reinforced like he was building a fortress. Everyone thought he was just being thorough, building to last. Nobody realized he was building to hold. The gold is in the barn foundation. All 3,200 pounds of it, cast into the concrete itself, mixed with the rebar, hidden in plain sight beneath 70 years of Montana weather and straw. The artwork and artifacts are sealed in waterproof containers within the walls. The documents proving ownership and genealogy are in the support beams, wrapped in copper tubes. Everything, right there. In the barn we used every day for decades, where horses ate hay and cats hunted mice, where you played as a little boy, completely unaware you were walking over a fortune. Marcus lowered the book, his mind reeling. The barn. He'd walked through it yesterday, had barely glanced at the foundation because it looked so ordinary, so weathered, so unremarkable. Perfect camouflage. He flipped forward, looking for more details. The extraction will be difficult, but not impossible. Robert drew precise maps, showing which sections of foundation hold gold, which hold artifacts. The key is in the support beam above the third stall on the eastern wall, carved into the wood itself, hidden by 70 years of dirt and shadow. But Marcus, my darling boy, knowing where it is and getting it out safely are two different things. The network is real. They've killed for this treasure before, and they'll kill again. Sheriff Clayton's father was one of Robert's squad. He knows the treasure exists. He spent his life searching for it. And there are others. Powerful people who've built fortunes and careers on stolen land and buried secrets. If they discover you've found the truth, they won't hesitate. The book went on to detail the network. Names, connections, crimes spanning decades. Clayton was just one node in a web that stretched across Montana and beyond. Judges who dismissed cases. Land developers who seized properties. Politicians who blocked investigations. All connected. All profiting. All desperate to keep their secrets buried. Your parents discovered something. Sarah, our beautiful daughter, found documents Robert had hidden, records of the network's crimes. She was going to expose them, to go to federal authorities. They killed her and James to silence them. Made it look like an accident. And then they came for you. They told us, give up the boy, or we'll make sure he has an accident too. We could fight them in court and lose. They own the judges. Or we could send you somewhere safe, somewhere they couldn't reach you. It destroyed us to let you go, Marcus. But it kept you alive. Robert spent the next 25 years gathering evidence, building an airtight case against every member of the network. It's all in the barn, sealed with the treasure. Names, dates, crimes, proof. When you retrieve the gold, you'll also retrieve the means to destroy them. To get justice not just for your parents, but for every family they've hurt, every person they've killed, every life they've ruined. This is your inheritance, Marcus. Not just money, justice. The book ended with detailed instructions for accessing the foundation, extracting the gold safely, and contacting federal authorities who weren't compromised. And a final message. I'm sorry I couldn't be there to guide you through this. I'm sorry for the years we lost. But I'm so proud of the man you've become. Your grandfather loved you with everything he had. He spent his last breath making sure you'd have the tools to finish this. Be careful, be smart, and know that wherever we are, we're watching over you. All my love, Grandma. Marcus closed the book as dawn began to break over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Ranger stirred, stretching. She's alive, Marcus said quietly, and she's been protecting me this whole time. But there was no time to process the emotion flooding through him. He had work to do. He climbed down from the widow's walk and headed to the barn, the book tucked safely in his jacket. The building looked exactly as it had yesterday, weathered, ordinary, unremarkable, perfect. Inside, Marcus moved to the third stall on the eastern wall. The support beam above it was thick pine, darkened with age and dirt. He pulled over a stepladder and climbed up, running his hands along the wood. There. His fingers found carved grooves, nearly invisible beneath decades of grime. He wiped away dirt and cobwebs, revealing numbers carved deep into the wood. 3N14E7W21S. Coordinates, marking specific locations in the foundation. Marcus pulled out his grandmother's book and found the reference page. The code indicated 3 gold deposits. Locations, north wall, east wall, west wall, south wall. Depths, 14 inches, 7 inches, 21 inches from surface. Exact positions where gold had been mixed into the concrete or artifacts had been sealed in. He'd need ground-penetrating radar to verify. He'd need engineering equipment to extract without destroying the entire barn. He'd need help from people he could trust. But first, he needed proof. Marcus climbed down and examined the foundation of the north wall. It looked like standard concrete work, gray, weathered, cracked in places from 7 decades of freeze-thaw cycles. He pulled out a pocket knife and scraped at one of the cracks, widening it slightly. The concrete was hard, but not impossible to work with. And there, maybe half an inch deep, his knife hit something that wasn't concrete. Metal. Yellow metal. Gold. Ranger barked excitedly, tail wagging. We found it. Boy, Marcus whispered. We actually found it. But his celebration was cut short by the sound of vehicles approaching. Multiple vehicles, moving fast. Marcus ran to the barn door and looked out. 3 SUVs were racing up the ranch road, kicking up dust. Sheriff's vehicles and unmarked cars. Clayton was making his move. Marcus's training kicked in immediately. He couldn't fight them. They had numbers, weapons, legal authority. But he could protect the evidence. He grabbed his phone and started recording, filming the carved coordinates, the foundation crack, everything he could document in 30 seconds. Then he sent the video to Whitmore with a message, "Found it. In the barn. If something happens to me, make sure the feds get this." The vehicle screeched to a stop outside. Doors slammed. Boots hit gravel. Marcus stepped out of the barn, Ranger at his side, and faced the approaching crowd. Clayton led the pack, flanked by 3 deputies and, surprisingly, Diane, Richard, and Thomas. The sheriff's expression was cold, calculated. "Marcus Reid, I have a warrant to search this property for stolen goods and illegal firearms." Marcus stood his ground. "Based on what probable cause?" "Anonymous tip that you've been trafficking in stolen property. And given your grandfather's history of paranoid delusions, we have reason to believe there may be dangerous materials on site." It was a complete fabrication, and they both knew it. "I want to see the warrant," Marcus said calmly. Clayton pulled out a folded document and handed it over. Marcus scanned it quickly. It was real, signed by Judge Morrison, another member of the network, according to his grandmother's book. "This warrant is illegal," Marcus said. "It's based on false pretenses and signed by a corrupt judge. I'm calling federal authorities." "Go ahead," Clayton said with a smirk. "But while you do that, we're executing this search." Deputies moved past Marcus toward the barn. Ranger growled, but Marcus held him back with a firm hand. "Shadow, stay," he commanded, using Ranger's tactical call sign. The dog stayed, but every muscle in his body was tensed, ready to spring. Diane approached, her expression triumphant. "You should have sold when you had the chance, Marcus. All of this could have been avoided." "You're working with them," Marcus said quietly. "You knew about the treasure. You probably knew about the network." Richard laughed. "The network? Is that what the old man called it? God, he really was paranoid." "He was right," Marcus said. "About all of it. And I have proof." That wiped the smirk off Thomas's face. "Proof of what?" "Everything. The murders. The land grabs. The conspiracy. 70 years of it. Names, dates, documents. All of it." Clayton's expression hardened. "You don't have anything." "Don't I? Then why are you here with a fake warrant and half the county's corrupt officials? Why not just wait and take me to court over the will?" "Because you found something," Diane said, her mask dropping completely. "Last night, Clayton saw you in the cellar. Saw you take files." Marcus smiled coldly. "Those files are already in federal hands. I uploaded everything before dawn. So whatever you do to me, whatever you do to this property, it's too late." It was a bluff. He hadn't uploaded anything yet. But their reactions told him everything he needed to know. Clayton's hand moved toward his weapon. The deputies tensed. And then a new voice cut through the tension. "I wouldn't do that if I were you, Sheriff." Everyone turned. A black SUV had pulled up silently during the confrontation. The doors opened, and 4 people stepped out, 3 in FBI windbreakers, 1 in a suit that screamed federal prosecutor. The woman in the suit walked forward, holding up credentials. "Special Agent Sarah Reeves, FBI. We've been monitoring this property for the past 48 hours under a federal investigation into corruption and racketeering." Clayton's face went white. "Sheriff Clayton, Judge Morrison signed that warrant this morning based on false information you provided. That constitutes fraud and abuse of power." Deputies, weapons on the ground. "Now." The deputies looked at Clayton, confused. The sheriff's hand shook slightly as he slowly moved his hand away from his weapon. "This is a local matter," Clayton tried. "You have no jurisdiction. We have jurisdiction over interstate criminal enterprises, which is exactly what we're investigating. And thanks to an upload we received approximately 6 hours ago from Joseph Whitmore, attorney at law, we have more than enough evidence to place you all under arrest." Marcus's knees nearly buckled with relief. Whitmore had done it. He'd sent the files to the FBI. But wait, 6 hours ago. That would have been before Marcus even found the barn coordinates. Agent Reeves caught his expression and gave the slightest nod. She'd been lying about the timing. But the effect was perfect. Diane, Richard, and Thomas bolted for their car. Two FBI agents intercepted them before they made it 10 feet. Clayton made one last desperate move. He lunged toward the barn, as if he could somehow grab the gold and run. Ranger moved faster. The dog hit Clayton like a missile, 90 pounds of trained protection animal driving the sheriff to the ground. Ranger didn't bite. He was too well trained for that, but he pinned Clayton with precision, snarling inches from the man's face. Shadow, hold, Marcus commanded. The dog froze, maintaining position, waiting. FBI agents moved in, pulling Clayton to his feet and cuffing him. The sheriff was screaming about illegal search, about rights, about how they'd never make charges stick. But Agent Reeves just smiled. "We have 70 years of evidence, Sheriff, including testimony from witnesses we've had in protective custody for the past decade. Your network is done." Marcus's breath caught. Witnesses in protective custody for a decade. His grandmother. Reeves caught his look and nodded slightly. "We should talk, Mr. Reid." Privately, Agent Reeves led Marcus into the house while her team secured the scene outside. Ranger stayed close, finally relaxing now that the immediate threat had passed. "Your grandmother is safe," Reeves said without preamble. "She's been in witness protection since 2015. We faked her death to protect her from the network." Marcus sank into a chair, the weight of everything finally hitting him. "She's been alive this whole time." "Yes, and she's been our key witness. When your grandfather died, we knew the network would make their move. We've been waiting for you to come home, Marcus. Waiting for you to find what Robert hid." "The gold." Reeves nodded. "And the evidence. Your grandfather spent decades documenting crimes we could never prove. With his files and your grandmother's testimony, we can dismantle the entire network." "How much did you know?" "Everything. We've been monitoring this property, protecting you without your knowledge." "The truck watching from the road?" "Ours. We couldn't risk direct contact until Clayton made his move." Marcus felt anger flash through him. "You used me as bait." "We gave you the chance to finish what your family started," Reeves corrected firmly. "The network killed your parents, stole your childhood, and terrorized your grandparents for 70 years. You deserve the right to take them down." She was right, and Marcus knew it. "What happens now?" he asked. "We extract the gold carefully, document everything, and begin the process your grandfather started, returning it to the families it was stolen from. You'll inherit what can't be traced back to specific owners, probably around $30 million after restitution." Marcus shook his head. "I don't want it. Use it for victims. Use it for veterans. Just not me." Reeves smiled. "Your grandfather said you'd say that. He left very specific instructions in case you did." She handed Marcus a sealed envelope marked "Final Instructions." Inside, in Robert's shaking handwriting, "Marcus, if you're reading this, you found the truth and you're refusing the money. I'm proud of you, son. Here's what I want you to do. Use the inheritance to build something that matters. A place where broken people can heal. Where veterans like you can find peace. Where the next generation doesn't have to carry the weight we carried. The ranch is yours. The land is yours. Build something good on ground that seemed too much darkness. You're free now, Marcus. Finally free." Act 4, Justice. The next 6 months passed in a blur of court proceedings, media coverage, and construction. Clayton, Diane, Richard, Thomas, and 17 other network members were indicted on charges ranging from murder to racketeering. The trials would take years, but the outcome was certain. The gold was carefully extracted from the barn foundation, exactly 3,200 pounds, worth $270 million at current market value. The artifacts and documents were removed from the walls, cataloged, and prepared for restitution. Marcus met his grandmother in a secure FBI facility. Their reunion was quiet, tearful, and healing. She'd aged, but her spirit was unbroken. "You did it," she whispered, holding him tight. "You finished what we started." And with Whitmore's help, Marcus began transforming Ridgeline Ranch into the Ridgeline Veterans Recovery Center, a place where soldiers struggling with PTSD, homelessness, and transition could find sanctuary, purpose, and healing. Act V Home. 1 year later, Marcus stood on the newly rebuilt porch, watching the sun set over the mountains. The ranch looked different now, restored, alive, purposeful. Behind him, the main house served as administrative offices. The barn had been converted into therapy spaces and workshops. 6 new cabins dotted the property, each named after one of Robert's squad members. 15 veterans currently called Ridgeline home, working the land, healing together, building new futures. Ranger, now graying at the muzzle but still strong, lay at Marcus's feet. The dog had become the unofficial mascot of the center, offering comfort to everyone who needed it. Martha appeared beside him, her hand warm on his shoulder. She'd been released from witness protection after the trials, finally free to live openly. He'd be proud, she said softly, looking out at what they'd built. I hope so, Marcus replied. I know so. She squeezed his shoulder. You took something built on pain and turned it into healing. That's what he always wanted. Down in the valley, a new arrival's truck pulled up the drive. Another veteran coming home. Another life getting a second chance. Ranger stood, tail wagging, ready to greet the newcomer. Marcus smiled. Come on, boy. We've got work to do. They walked down the porch steps together, man and dog, toward the truck and the person climbing out. A young woman in her 20s, service dog at her side, hope and fear mixed in her eyes. Welcome to Ridgeline, Marcus said, extending his hand. Welcome home. And as the Montana sky blazed with sunset colors, Marcus finally understood what his grandfather had known all along. Some inheritances aren't measured in gold. They're measured in lives restored, in justice served, in futures reclaimed from darkness. The ranch his grandfather built to hide a fortune had become something better, a place where broken people could become whole again, where veterans could find peace, where home meant something real. Ranger barked once, joyful and certain, and the sound echoed across the valley like a benediction. The war was over. The healing had begun. And Marcus Reid, the boy who'd lost everything, had finally found what he'd been searching for all along.